Right now, somewhere between waking up and reading this sentence, your cortisol has already jumped by 50 to 75%. Not because anything's wrong, because that's just what your brain does within the first 30 minutes of opening your eyes, every single morning, whether you notice it or not. Here's the part that actually matters. What you do in those next 30 minutes decides whether that spike works for you or against you for the rest of the day. And for most people, what they do is check a phone and drink coffee within about 90 seconds, which, as you're about to see, is close to the worst possible combination for that exact hormone. I'm going to give you 5 specific habits, some backed by real Japanese cultural practice, all backed by actual peer-reviewed research. And one of them is a technique almost no morning routine video ever mentions, even though it's one of the single best-studied stress tools we currently have. Stay until the end, because habit number 4 alone is worth more than the rest of this video combined. Before the 5 habits, 30 seconds of context, because it changes how you'll hear everything after this. The cortisol awakening response is real, well-documented, and completely normal. Cortisol rises sharply in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking, then gradually tapers off across the day. It's not your enemy. It's what gets you alert and functional. The problem is what happens when that natural, necessary spike gets stacked with unnecessary extra stressors before your body's even finished its own wake-up sequence. Chronically elevated cortisol has also been linked specifically to increased abdominal fat storage, more than other areas of the body, largely because cortisol receptors are denser in the visceral fat surrounding your organs. That's part of why chronic stress tends to show up around the midsection specifically. So the goal isn't eliminating cortisol. It's not needlessly piling more onto a spike your body's already running through on schedule. Habit number 1 starts before you've even left the bedroom, and it's the one thing almost everyone gets backwards. After 7 or 8 hours without fluids, your body wakes up mildly dehydrated most mornings. Hitting that dehydrated system immediately with caffeine, a stimulant, adds a second stressor directly on top of your already rising cortisol curve. A simple glass of water first thing starts rehydrating your system before you introduce anything that further ramps up your nervous system. Some people add a small pinch of salt for electrolytes, which is reasonable and low risk, though I'll be honest, the effect size here is modest. This is a sensible baseline habit, not a dramatic metabolic intervention. That's the simplest habit on this list. Habit number 2 is where a genuine habit, centuries-old Japanese practice, actually lines up remarkably well with modern neuroscience. Not a stretch, an actual documented overlap. In Japan, there's a real long-standing practice called Asasanpo, literally morning walk. Stepping outside, generally earlier in the morning for a walk in natural daylight. Here's why it lines up so well with research. Light is the primary signal your brain uses to set your circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour clock. Dr. Sachin Panda's research at the Salk Institute has repeatedly shown that people with disrupted circadian rhythms tend to have higher cortisol levels and more visceral fat. Morning sunlight helps anchor that rhythm, which cascades into better-timed melatonin release that night, better sleep, and healthier cortisol regulation the next morning. It starts with something as simple as 5 to 10 minutes outside, actual daylight hitting your eyes, not through a window, not from a screen. The walk part matters too. Stanford researchers have studied something called optic flow, the visual pattern created when your surroundings move past you on both sides as you walk. And there's real, though still relatively early research suggesting this has a calming effect on the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center. Genuinely promising, though less firmly established than the sunlight circadian piece. Habit 2 earns its place fairly. But this is exactly where most morning routine advice stops. Get sunlight, take a walk, without ever mentioning the single fastest, most rigorously tested stress tool to come out of a university lab in years. That's habit number 3, and it's the one I genuinely bet money you've never tried. In January 2023, a Stanford team, neurobiologist Andrew Huberman, psychiatrist David Spiegel, and researcher Melis Yilmaz-Balban published a randomized controlled trial in the peer-reviewed journal Cell Reports Medicine. They tested 114 participants across 4 daily 5-minute practices over a full month: cyclic sighing, box breathing, an alternate breathing pattern, and standard mindfulness meditation. The winner for reducing physiological stress arousal and improving mood, cyclic sighing, built around the physiological sigh, 2 short inhales through your nose, the second topping off your lungs a bit further, followed by 1 long, slow exhale through your mouth. 1 full cycle takes 15 to 30 seconds. The mechanism is elegant. Your lungs contain roughly 500 million tiny air sacs, and some naturally collapse during normal breathing throughout the day. The double inhale reinflates them, maximizing oxygen exchange. The long exhale activates your vagus nerve, the primary switch shifting your nervous system out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. 5 minutes of this daily outperformed mindfulness meditation of equal length for reducing physiological arousal and improving mood over the 4-week study period. A free 30-second technique, zero equipment, beating a well-established practice in a real head-to-head trial. Do 1 or 2 cycles the moment your alarm goes off, before your feet even hit the floor. That alone can take real edge off the spike we opened this video with. Habit 4 is where most people accidentally sabotage everything they just did. When you wake up, your brain is loaded with a chemical called adenosine. It's what makes you feel groggy. Your body clears a meaningful portion of it within roughly 90 minutes of waking. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, but drink it too early while adenosine is still high, and you're blocking receptors that are already saturated. The adenosine doesn't disappear, it waits. When caffeine wears off later, that backlog can hit at once, the classic afternoon crash, a state your body often reads as an additional stressor, nudging cortisol back up. There's a real Japanese aesthetic concept called ma, intentional pause, negative space between actions, and applying it here, deliberately building in a buffer before your first cup, works with your body's chemistry instead of against it. Delaying caffeine by 60 to 90 minutes is genuinely well supported, even if the ideal exact number varies person to person. That's 4. The 5th habit costs nothing, takes no extra time, and is still the one almost nobody actually does. The moment you check notifications, messages, or headlines, your brain gets hit with a rapid series of small dopamine and cortisol spikes, shifting your nervous system from resting to reactive within seconds, often before you've even gotten out of bed. Protecting that first 20 to 30 minutes, phone untouched, gives your nervous system room to complete its own natural wake-up sequence, instead of getting hijacked by someone else's notification the second you're conscious. So here's the full, honest version: water before caffeine, real daylight and a walk, a physiological sigh when that spike hits hardest, coffee delayed by 60 to 90 minutes, and your phone left alone for the first half hour. 5 habits, 0 purchases required, and one of them, the sigh, is probably brand new to you, which alone might be the most useful thing in this entire video. If this gave you a clearer, more honest version of your morning routine, subscribe. I break down what the science actually says. No fluff, no fear-mongering. If you only try one thing from this video, make it the sigh. 2 inhales, 1 long exhale, 30 seconds, free, starting tomorrow morning. Everything else on this list matters too, but that one you can start using today.